Um, this morning we are graced by the esteemed congressman from the 11th Congressional District in Texas, Congressman Mike Conaway, who is in his 8th and final term as a U.S. House member. We're always enthusiastic to be able to talk to Congressman Conaway. He's got an incredibly distinct career, served as the former chairman of the House Committee on Agriculture, where he still serves now as the ranking member, also serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Congressman Conaway has been a great member of the Permian Basin for a very long time and has represented us incredibly well up in Washington, D.C. and throughout his 29 county district. But it says here, I've got a note that you've only been able to accomplish the things you've been able to accomplish today because Grant Swartzwelder was in your CBS class way back when. Is that true?
That's exactly right. That was the launching pad for which the career was built. Exactly.
That's right. Well, and for everybody joining us, this is the OTA PBPA Oilfield Strong webinar we've been putting on for several weeks now. We're really trying to bring content that's impactful to the PBPA membership for their jobs, for their careers, for their families, in particular because of what's been going on with the pandemic. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to Congressman Conaway today and kind of get that more federal perspective on what's going on. Congressman, do you want to open it up with a few words for everybody?
Well, I can, Stephen, and thank you very much for that kind introduction and those kind words. I certainly appreciate that. Our relationship with PBPA is long-standing. It predates my service in Congress, and so it's good to be with you guys today. I do want to replow a lot of ground. You guys have been living the wreck that was the combination 1-2 punch of COVID, as well as the price war that the Saudis and the Russians entered into in early March. They just happened to coincide at the same time. And then the COVID, of course, took the world economy down and demand collapsed in the face of, in addition to overproduction by the Saudis and the Russians, demand collapsed as well. And so you've been living it, trying to cope with it. We've done booms and busts before in the oil business. If you live in West Texas longer than a couple of hours, you're going to experience both sides of that coin. But this is the first time we've had to fight the pandemic of COVID in the exact same time. So part of our problem in D.C. is that because these two things have overlapped and the wreck has occurred, it was hard to help folks understand that in addition to the pandemic that the rest of the United States was dealing with, the oilfield petroleum industry also had a separate independent wreck, and it was hard to distinguish the impacts of both of them at the same time. And so getting oilfield specific things done has been difficult. One of the things that was tried early on was to continue to take put a little bit more demand in the system, was to fill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, 77 million barrels. There was not an appropriation for that, so they had to go to a storage agreement circumstance. We tried on several bills to add the amount of money necessary to actually buy the crude oil rather than use the storage contracts, but my Democrat colleagues vehemently opposed it. Pelosi led that charge. She really doesn't like you guys. Maybe a surprise to you, but she really doesn't. And her cabal does not like the petroleum industry. And so we were unable to get money to actually buy the crude oil. Now, as you know, the strategic oil has certain parameters, and that had to be heavy crude that was being purchased, not the light sweet that we had. There was an abundance out here during that time frame. And so that they took nominations. I think they've begun to fill parts of the 77 million barrels yet to fill up. But it makes sense at these low prices for us to have purchased that oil, put it in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at these low prices. That's just fiscally responsible, and my Democrat colleagues just flat out refused to do that. Obviously, some of you were able to participate in the PPP program. There's still money. Well, the program expired on the 8th, but there was money left there to be borrowed, as well as Main Street programs that the bigger companies should be able to get access to. But these are just hard times, and we've been through hard times before. Trying to figure out how do we cope with this COVID issue without just destroying everything that we know. And I think we're coming to the realization that we just have to power through. Protect those that are most vulnerable, absolutely. But whether it's starting school or getting back to business or reopen the economy more fulsomely, we're just going to have to do that. be as smart as we can, wear the mask when we should, hand wash and sanitize, and don't be around sick people. If you're sick, have the discipline to stay home and not go share whatever it is you've got. It might be COVID, it might be just a common cold, but don't go share that with other folks. And if you've got people in your family that are sick, don't share that with other people. I mean, it's just common sense kinds of things. But, the shutdown in March, April, and May was not to prevent anybody, any future illnesses. It was to allow us to make sure that our hospital system, the healthcare system, could cope with whatever level of cases came into the system at any particular point in time. And we've proven that. Not only have we proven that it works, but we also increased PPE and ventilators, all those kind of things that have gone on, that we're now in a position that, yes, this is a disease. We don't have a vaccine. People exposed, you're going to get sick, but can the healthcare system handle that while the rest of the folks that aren't sick get on about business and create the kind of prosperity that we all want and we're enjoying, quite frankly, right up until China stubbed the toe of the world by not acting responsibly early on in this regard. So right now we've got another monster bill that's being proposed in the Senate and the House of Representatives. The House passed a version back in June that was a $3.4 trillion deal. One of the problems we should have faced in March and April when we were doing the other big deals is a debt ceiling and or the concept that we're borrowing every single penny of this money. We're already running federal deficits, so there's no new money in the system. And so anything we do on this next round is pure debt. And that's, that first round, I got it. I participated in it. We didn't ever know what as much as we know, but we know today that we can cope and that we may, in fact, not need that next round that was there. I'm sure many of you that have hourly workers face the problem of the fact that the feds were paying folks $15 an hour to stay home plus whatever the state was doing. And so that raised that minimum wage to in the mid-20s for folks to stay home versus go to work. Well, that program ended at the end of July. We now have anecdotal evidence that people are actually going back to work because they lost that $15 an hour stipend from the federal taxpayer. And that's the right thing. So as we look at that next program, it should be as targeted as possible. I'm not sure that many Republicans in the House will support whatever they do simply because it simply adds to the national debt, money that our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, that we're in effect borrowing from them to do whatever it is we need to do. And so stay tuned. I'm not sure the Democrats actually want any kind of a solution. They think this turmoil helps them in November because at this point, with about 80-plus days left for the election, everything runs through a calculus of what does this mean for the election? What does it mean for me getting reelected? What does it mean for everything? It's all about the election. Scant attention being paid to what's in the best interest of America, short-term, long-term, all those kind of things. That kind of gets shoved to the side through this lens of what does it do for November? So, Stephen, with those comments, I could just prattle on forever, but that'd be boring to everybody but me. So I think you've got some questions, and I hope our folks on the call will ask questions as well. But again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to your membership.
Absolutely, and thank you again for joining us today. And for everybody out there, one of the things that Congressman Conaway has always been good about, whether it's his town halls or just coming back to the district and going around to different events to talk with folks, is he's very open to talk to people about what really is impacting them. So very similar to our PBPA membership. If you do have a question today for Congressman Conaway, please shoot it through to us on the Q&A, and we'll be happy to try to pass on and see if he can answer for you. But kind of getting things kicked off, you did a great summary of everything that's been going on in DC, which, as many of us know out here, has been a lot of talk and not necessarily a lot that's really been able to impact and help folks. But how are things in your office? You guys are humans too, not just machines. You have to go through these impacts as well. Your district offices, your office in DC, how are your folks doing? How are you guys handling things?
Well, the district offices have handled it really well. I've got some folks on my team that are in the high-risk categories, and so we wanted to do whatever we needed to do to protect them, let them do their jobs, but protect them. And so we didn't see anybody personally for a long time there. We've begun to ease back into that. So the district folks have done fine. In D.C., we've gone to half in the office, half at home, kind of shuffling back and forth. Having the folks in the office were able to spread out enough that, no one's contaminating each other necessarily. And so we've done those things. The real weird thing, Stephen, is the impact on Congress itself. It takes 45 minutes now to take a single vote There's nobody in the halls. There's no, no constituents, no lobbyists, nobody wandering around the halls, none of that energy, none of that, kind of livelihood liveliness, not livelihood, liveliness that goes on when we're up there. You've been there a zillion times, and the froth of people coming and going. None of that's happening. No committee work is being done in the normal sense where you sit in a room with your colleagues and hash out things to try to get to an answer that's not so much Republican or Democrat, but what's in the best interest of our nation. Not much of that's going on. And since May, the Democrats have been able to, quote unquote, proxy vote. So they don't even have to come to D.C. We've got members who've not been back to D.C. since March, and yet they call in their votes, they call in their votes. And that's just not right, I don't think. I think you can't do the job. Zoom calls, we try to do those, but they're not really great for actually getting stuff done. They're a bit stiff and it's structured, of course, because of the niche of the beast. And they're a poor substitute. We're still doing them, but a poor substitute nonetheless. So we're coping. It's not how I wanted to spend that last year in Congress, but no one is that I found says, hey, this is exactly how I want to spend 2020 is how we've done it. So there's no sympathy for me in that regard, because none of us want 2020 to have looked like it has so far.
Absolutely. It's something that we've even talked a little bit about every day pretty much, but in particular on our webinar series, we had some folks from the health, safety, and environment background in our companies talk about how do you get back to work? What can you do? What can't you do? How is it really impacting people psychologically? How is it impacting people health-wise outside of the pandemic, even if they don't have anything? And it's something that's going to be huge factors that we're probably not going to know for years to come on what it's really done to our society to have these kind of shutdowns.
Yeah. Sounds a little callous, but we're just going to have to take risks. Calculated risk, smart risk, but we're just going to take risks. We've got to get back at it. COVID's not going to go away. We've got to find a way to cope with it, deal with it. We have 40 plus million cases of the flu every year, 30 to 50,000 deaths from flu every year. We don't panic about that. We have a vaccine. We just cope with it. We move forward and keep going. This will be no different at some point in time. But we're going to have to take some risks. Now, they ought to be smart. If you're over a certain age, particularly if you have underlying issues, stay away from crowds. You need to be whatever you need to do to don't get this disease, because it is unyielding in its impact on and folks who have diabetes, particularly obese and other kinds of things. You're high risk, and be careful. But everybody else who's regularly healthy and those kind of things, we should be able to get back at it. Yes, we know we're taking risks. I'm going to get in a car here in a little while. It's a risk. I get on airplanes every once in a while. It's a risk. And so this COVID is no different. We are tougher than that. We are Americans, for goodness sakes. And we settle this land in the face of incredible odds and have made it work. And that's our ancestry. That's our heritage. And we are those people. And we're just going to have to make it happen. Our medical system is getting much, much better. They know now that intubation may be the last thing you want to try to do, that we're getting better at it. Good results on the testing of vaccines. There may be some therapeutics that work. And so just do the smart things, and we got to get at it and get back at it and quit cowering from these threats.
It's great, inspiring words, and it's words that I think we're all going to have to just kind of commit to memory, because that's going to be the way forward. We're not at a point we've gotten so far into the summer, or in the spring it was, well, hopefully the heat and the dryness of summer will help to kill off this disease, or this virus. Obviously that didn't happen. And so we're continuing to adjust, and we know our medical communities out here are continuing to adjust as well, as are the people trying to figure out how do you move forward. You mentioned
one other point I'd like to make is we focus, I think, way too much on total cases. That number's never going to go down. It just gets worse and worse and worse. 5 million plus, right? So me leading my quiet life today, do I need to focus on 5 million, or do I need to focus on the number of folks who are sick right now? People who got sick in March, April, May, and June have gotten well, or they passed away. Those cases are behind us, and those aren't really the fight today. And so, yes, that total number is going to be important for our statisticians to try to figure out all the things that they figure out. But for you and me day to day, that just is a negative that we I think we ought to focus on active cases and the number of folks in the hospital and number of folks in ICU beds. Those are the markers that we should go by. And in District 11, we're at about 3,500 active cases, diagnosed active cases. Now, obviously, there are more cases that we don't know about, but active diagnosed cases, about 3,500. That number's kind of plateaued over the last couple of weeks, stayed where it's at. Our hospitalizations in the district are actually down a little bit, total bed-wise. And so those are numbers that are encouraging to me. And that total number is just discouraging on every level. It's never going to go to zero again. And so I think we ought to quit focusing on tracking the course, but the focus should be on how many people are sick today and wandering around our communities, those kind of things. That's what is important to me today, not the total number.
Right. Former PBPA Chairman Steve Pruitt in a question, and you've touched on it already. It talks a lot about the difficulty of trying to get anything through to help the oil and gas industry because of the Democratic Party's refusal to really budge on some issues. Do you see any help on that at all outside of a Republican win in November?
I really don't. They are so co-opted to this idea that, well, the manifesto that they're building and working off of does away with the internal combustion engine by 2035. 15 years from now, we will all be bicycles and horses and walking. Because there won't be a replacement for it, but we'll just do away with it. That doesn't bode well for the oil and gas industry. Obviously, the thing that crowd misses altogether is that while gasoline and diesel are important, those aren't that's not everything. Plastics and medicines and lipstick, for goodness sakes, all of those have petroleum products in it, and they don't understand the broader application of our industry, and so it's going to be tough. That will be the kind of the clarion call for the left. Is they hate the oil and gas business inappropriately, but they do. There may be a utopia several centuries out that where oil and gas is no longer used. I mean, it's a finite resource, and we'll go to something else. But the issue is, how do we get from where we are today to that particular point? And it's a long way off. We got to be able to exist. And the utopians ignore that altogether. This Green New Deal ignores that idea altogether. They don't really appreciate the fact that in America, manufacturers and others have a competitive advantage because of our lower energy prices and against the rest of the world. The other thing, from a Green New Deal standpoint, we can produce natural gas in America, Texas, ship it to the coast, liquefy it, put it in the tankers, send it to Estonia, offload it, use it in Europe for a carbon footprint that is less than the Russian carbon footprint for the way they produce and the way they do their deal. That same gas coming through pipelines into Europe and being used. So even our American gas, the way we do things here, we're better from an ecology standpoint than our climate standpoint than the Russians. And so misguided on every level. But Stevie, I don't really see Pruitt. I don't see much change in that narrative on the Democrat side. Obviously, our moderates in the Democrat Party who understand this are just being drowned out. Their voices will not be heard, particularly during the campaign. You'll be able to see over the next several days, particularly next week, when the Democrats go through their convention. You look at their lineup, they got Bernie Sanders, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, and then Kamala Harris, and then, of course, Joe Biden, if he makes it to Friday of next week. Just how left they're going to go, and they're going to bang the oil and gas industry at every step.
And we had a speaker on during this webinar series that talked about the fact that worldwide energy consumption, 17 to 18% accounts for electrical consumption. So even if you got to the point where you are generating all electricity from renewable energy sources, you're still only talking about 17 to 18% of the total energy consumption for the world. So that the idea that we can replace the other 82, 83% of energy that has nothing to do with electricity with electric only generation is just beyond me. But you were talking about the Democratic things, and something that you got to participate in a few weeks ago to try to harken back to your memory was a trip out to Odessa with President Trump. And I wanted to check in with you and see what you thought about that and see how you thought it went.
Man, what a great trip. Actually had a big impact. The president came with the misunderstanding that $40 oil was going to be terrific, and everybody's excited about it because it was based off of low of 37 negative. So he was kind of working off that paradigm. He had a small group meeting with producers that helped him understand that $40 is a maintenance level. We're not going to be doing much more drilling or completing. We're just going to keep going with what we've got. Those declines will naturally occur, particularly in shale we'll drop off quickly. But we're $40 is clearly not enough to get us back to where we need to in terms of replacing existing declines in production, let alone increasing beyond that. And so he got a good firsthand conversation with folks who live it, and came away thinking, wow, he really did learn something. It was a great visit to have him come to my hometown, and first sitting president to go to Odessa, Texas ever. President Bush and his dad, both as president, had come to Midland, but had never come to Odessa. We actually had the event at the new Marriott Convention Center downtown Odessa, and then we drove to Greenwood for a drill site for the backdrop for the president's presentation there. Throughout that entire trip, all along the roads and highways and the city streets, lined with people enthusiastically waving Trump signs and cheering. And so we got back on the plane to go back to D.C. And the president said, "Hey, Mike, I didn't see one protester." And I said, "No, Mr. President, you're pretty popular out here." And so it was a good trip, good for him to come, and it was impactful in the sense that he came away with a better perspective on $40 oil versus what he had when he arrived.
Well, that's great, and that's what we would hope would occur. We pride ourselves in the greatest resource out here not being what's below the ground, but being the people above the ground. And there's not a better resource to be able to educate somebody on what really does impact the people out here than the people doing the work. So we're
I was
very
hoping
fortunate.
when I brought Boehner out, I was able to get him up on the rig floor and show him operations, those kind of things. But obviously, safety concerns for the president, we were unable to actually get him on that floor. We had a great drilling rig behind him as a backdrop and a pumping unit, but we weren't able to get him up there to show him what actually goes on a rig floor. He obviously is aware that rig count dropping from close to 900 to under 251 last time I saw it a couple of weeks ago. So the impact that has. But I was hoping to get him on a rig floor, but we were unable to make that happen. Secret Service was a little nervous about President of the United States stepping over to a rig floor.
Yeah, I can understand that, and that also goes to demonstrate to folks that don't really understand what we do out here that what we do can be dangerous. It is not just as simple as plug and play, and it's people's lives that are taken into consideration. But we pride ourselves in doing the best job we possibly can to protect our people and to make sure that all the policies are in place and good regulation is in place to help make sure that we're doing just that.
Well, back in 100 years ago, when I roughnecked for Parker drilling and sharp drilling, those same operations that were then happening now, folks would be in a lot of trouble. It is much safer. It's much better. And we just do things better in the oil business than we've ever have. And it's a real credit to the industry for what how they've continued to improve, with robotics in some instances to eliminate the need for having people in high risk positions on the rig floor and all those kind of things. So it's just, it's better. You guys have a great story to tell. Unfortunately, we're swinging to the choir most of the time, particularly with our Democrat colleagues.
Yeah,
they don't want to listen to it. We're just, instead of talking to the Democrats, we're singing to ourselves.
Right. And, that's something that being an association that covers two states, that we face a lot more on the western side of the Permian Basin than we do on the eastern side of the Permian Basin. But fortunately, we've got some really great folks in southeast New Mexico that understand our industry incredibly well. And help us to be advocates, help us as industry to be advocates, not just on the local level or on the state level, but even up in Washington, D.C. But not everybody hears that voice, and not everybody can really understand what's trying to be said. And in particular on the New Mexico side, they've already had to go into session since the pandemic's happened. Texas has not had to do that yet, but New Mexico did, for the fact that they had to figure out how to redo their budget, and they had to go through that process of figuring out how do we meet in person when no one is supposed to be meeting, not let alone the fact in a city like Santa Fe where everything is shut down, where everybody is trying to convene and there's not hotels to stay in, there's not restaurants to eat at. How do you bring all those people in? And they had to do similar to what you were talking about, you experienced in the halls up in Washington, D.C., where it was just the elected officials. They couldn't even have their staff present when they were going into session. And so in particular, the rest of the public had to watch just like everybody's watching us right now from a distance on the computer screens. And it sure is a different process when it has to be conducted that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so before we get to the end here, I'm gonna ask you the hardest question of any question that I've asked you so far. Are we actually going to have a college football team?
I'll tell you what, if we don't, there's not enough mental health workers in the United States or the world perhaps to handle the depression and the mental health aspects of it. one thing that looks like six-man football is going to go forward. So there may be stadiums all over West Texas that would otherwise not be full with people who don't know any of the kids on the field. They just want to go watch the football by going to see the six-man kids, six-man ball, which is a really fast game. But it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it. The two of the big conferences, three of them, including Lone Star, smaller conference like Lone Star Conference, have already said no fall sports. And so my guess is that herd mentality will go forward with that deal, and we'll have 2020 will be the first year without a college football season, which is it's I'm joking about the mental aspects of that, and there are some of that, but the commerce associated with this as well. Colleges are already in a hole because they flushed their dorms out last spring to keep everybody home, and they lost those revenues or had to give them back. Their dorms not going to be anywhere near as full, so there's an impact there. Football, particularly in the big schools, funds all the rest of the sports, and so those kids on scholarships on lacrosse and soccer and gymnastics and golf and others, well, the schools honor those scholarships because they don't have the cash cow that typically is college football. A lot of that is television revenue. They're not going to have that either. So it's a tough decision for these board of regents to make. They're the right ones to make it. I don't second guess them, basically because they will have more information. We had a great presentation yesterday in San Angelo at our legislative conference down there by Ted Mitchell, who's the chancellor at Texas Tech, the Texas Tech system, and he was asked that question: are you going to have football? And he said, the Big 12 is meeting right now. He's putting in place a plan to reopen Texas Tech. They're going to have kids on campus. They're going to have kids in classrooms. They've got procedures. And he's a physician, by the way, an internal physician, so he understands that aspects of it. They're going to have kids on campus. The bigger classes, he said, like an English class that might have 150 kids in it, there'll be 75 of them in the classroom one day, and the other 75 doing it virtually. They'll flip those back and forth. They'll have assigned seating so that they know where everybody's sat. If somebody does get sick, and he said, we will have kids get sick, they'll know who is around them and who to kind of watch and who to quarantine, those kinds of things. They're setting up quarantine facilities on campus for kids who get sick, all those kind of things. But he's taking Tech. We're going to reopen. Now, the football decision is not his alone. Obviously, the Big 12, all those schools will make that decision, and they'll do it soon. But I appreciate Ted's leading into this issue. He said, we've got to get these kids back face-to-face. The learning is better. The emotional impact on them is better. And we've got to have to, they're in that group that's got, they get sick, but they generally do really, really well. He said, I've got to protect my older professors because I've got, my cadre of professors has got young ones, but have got folks in their 60s and 70s. So we'll be doing what we can to make sure we protect those. But Ted, at least, and with Texas Tech, is leaning into this, and he wants his kids back on campus to the extent they can, and doing all the smart stuff. He was a physician when the AIDS epidemic happened in the mid-'80s, and we didn't know what caused it. We didn't know what transmitted it. Lots of things going on. He said, as an industry, the medical profession just said, all right, we just have to assume everybody has it, and we'll treat them accordingly to and no differently. Well, same deal here. We know folks could have it, and but you don't show the symptoms, so we're going to have to treat it as if you do and act accordingly. But whether they have football or not, tough call.
Well, and I think that one of the most important things you said is that the decisions should be made by the people that have the most information. Right. And that's going to be different depending on who you're talking to in different situations, whether you're talking about ISD schools, or whether you're talking about cities or counties or universities or football programs. And that's one of the things that we've learned so much through this entire process is we continue to get more information. And it's incredibly important to make sure that people making the decisions are the ones that are the most informed and have that information available.
Well, nobody loves the children in Midland, Texas more than the teachers and administrators and the school board of Midland, Texas. And I trust them to make the best decision they can. And we really, as that decision is made and it works or doesn't work, then we need to be, we're pretty risk averse in the sense that when we make a decision and it doesn't turn out right, we generally go back and just beat the dog out of whoever the decision maker was at the time. We have to understand that they're working with the information they had at the time. 6 months from now, we'll have different information, and we might have made a different decision had we known that today, but we don't. And so make it the best decision you can. The teacher's health, kids' health, mental health, learning. I talked to the superintendent Goldthwait a month or so ago, and he said, we have the summer slide. That's that academic achievement up through the end of May. The kids go home for the summer. They come back in late August, September, and they've lost some of what they had. That's called the summer slide. We got to do some catching up. He said this COVID slide may be a full year because the academic, the teaching, broke off in mid-March, and they lost all those months. Yes, some of the kids were doing it online, but you know yourself, there's some parents who are more diligent about that than others. Some parents, some kids who have internet access and some that don't. All those kind of good things contributed to that COVID slide. And in his evaluation, he thinks it may be close to a year. That's terrible. And so as Ted said yesterday, as you make the decision to do what you do, weigh the risks of, whose kids are being hurt or helped the most, and whose kids are, what are those risks are. And we've got kids in rural America. We've got kids in inner cities that don't have the same kind of family infrastructure that the other kids do. Those children shouldn't be punished if we can help it by them not being able to achieve academically because their system is not set up to do what the moms and dads who do have the capacity, do have the time and the inclination to be able to do for their kids what and help them learn. But my wife Suzanne is a teacher, and she said, I don't know if I could teach a kid to write his name virtually. I'm not sure I could teach him to read virtually. So this idea that we could do it all virtually is yet to be, is still under evaluation, I think. And the academic achievement over this, what happened from last spring, going into this fall and moving forward, the tests will show how far along the kids did or didn't get. And obviously none of us want the children to be behind where they should have been academically.
Right. And that's so much of the conversation, and you and I were even speaking about it earlier on. So many of the impacts and the benefits or the downside of whatever we're doing right now is not going to be known until years down the road, which is a hard pill to try to swallow. But that's exactly how it works sometimes, in particular in this. Congressman, I greatly appreciate you joining us today, in particular on behalf of the PBPA leadership, the PBPA membership, Grant and all the folks there at OTA. We are so appreciative and humbled by your commitment to serve as our congressman for 8 terms up in Washington, D.C. We couldn't ask for a better congressman over that term, and we really are glad that you're going to be coming back out here and joining us on the other side at the end of your term and be able to shake your fist like the rest of us do whenever something doesn't quite go the way we want to up in D.C.
I guess. Stephen, thank you for those very, very kind words. I really appreciate that. Let me finish with something that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with oil and gas. But I got asked yesterday at that conference about threats to our nation. We've got threats to this industry that you guys are living and dealing with every single day. But I think the biggest threat to our nation is the loss of civility, the inability to get along, the inability to treat each other nicely. And those are core values that start with a moral system that's based on Scripture. There is a promise and a solution to our problems found in 2 Chronicles 7:14. The promise is, God says, of people who call by my name will humble themselves, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways and seek my face. I'll hear them from heaven. Mm-hmm. I'll forgive their sins and I'll heal their land. That is a promise, but it's also the solution that we should be pursuing as aggressively as we possibly can, not only on an individual basis, but as a nation as well, because there are things wrong in our nation today that only divine guidance and divine intervention, quite frankly, can get us from. And so if each of us would claim that promise and seek that solution, I think our nation would be on better footing for facing whatever we have to face coming forward, whether it's the long-term threats of China and Russia and the instability of the world, COVID, new COVID-like diseases that will pop up from time to time. We need God's help.
Absolutely. And great words to end on. Good luck in the last few months of your term. We'll be happy to have you back out here with us in the Permian Basin soon for the permanent future, at least as long as you guys aren't traveling and enjoying your lives. And then thank you everybody for attending today. Thank you for joining us. And if you missed today's session, or at least any parts of it, or if you know somebody you want to share this with, please remember that you can find these videos on the PBPA website and also on OTA's YouTube page. If you have any questions for the congressman that you want to pass along to us that we can get to him, please do so, and we'll get them to him, and he'll get you answers. But thank you again, Congressman Conaway, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, everybody.